me just pull that up. Okay. All right. So, yeah, thanks again for doing this. All right, let me pull up my questions real quick. Okay. So, I was hoping that today we could discuss a little bit more about how you about building community specifically, because this is such a new like idea that I believe your organization might be the only one, at least that I've heard of. So, I'm wondering when you first got started, like, what was that process like? Um, how did you start gathering members? How did you start getting the word out? Like, what was the first like few months like for you?
A lot of social media engagement, probably more than I would like to admit, but whatever my ambivalence about the political effects of social media, the fact is that it has been actually quite instrumental
Hmm.
in finding others who left. And there are some individuals I really need to personally thank. So one of whom is former Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger.
Hmm.
He happened to discover my Twitter account. He retweeted out to his million plus followers at the time.
Hmm.
And next I know, my Twitter notifications are nonstop. So I knew that someone with a large following had engaged some of my content. And it turned out to be he. And then I know I'm in touch with him. We're communicating, we're messaging, we're having Zoom calls. And he became really an advocate for leaving MAGA. So as a result of his belief in what we're doing, it enabled me to keep creating on social media and reach a larger and larger audience.
Hmm.
And as I did that, I started to get to know others online who had said, I know someone who left MAGA, speak to this person. I also expanded my social media reach going into other places like Instagram and TikTok, your normal frequented social media apps. And I started discovering others who were telling their stories
Hmm.
about having been in MAGA and left. And I reached out to all of them and I said, hey, here's our group, here's our community for those who left. We want to ask you to offer a testimonial.
Hmm.
And thus far, yes, I wish that these testimonials were happening, Vicky, sooner and more rapidly than they have been. But we're up to over a half dozen. We've got others who are gonna tell their stories. We've also got friends and family
Hmm.
of those who are in the thrall of MAGA who are also going to tell their stories. We've already actually published a few of them with Midas Touch Network, where
Hmm.
we produce videos in collaboration with those guys there.
Yeah, I saw some of the videos on YouTube.
And the idea of community is one, admittedly, that didn't occur to me initially.
Hmm.
My background is as an English major. I was a journalist, did a lot of feature writing, didn't formally write professionally in any sense really throughout my many, many years after graduating college. Even my time in MAGA, I mentioned in our first conversation, I wrote dozens of stories. I was never paid for any of them.
Hmm.
Some of the stories I've published after having left MAGA did pay, but those are it technically makes me a professional freelancer. But it wasn't like I wasn't I didn't have this idea of I've got it. It's going to be a community that we're going to create.
Hmm.
So I was really just looking to focus on storytelling.
Hmm.
But the more I would speak to, and after a few testimonials, and after having gotten to know others, and I started to think, okay, what Leaving MAGA needs to be is it needs to be a place without judgment, without ostracization. Every one of us, our Homo sapiens species, yearns for communal existence.
Yeah.
This is not a want, it
Hmm.
is a necessity.
Hmm.
And one of the biggest lies that I think we tell ourselves as a species is when we say, well, we don't care what other people think about us. That is not true, Vicky.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not suggesting that we try to be everything to everyone. That's also an endeavor of futility to do that.
Hmm.
But those who with whom we've spoken, when they've told us their stories, and I've asked them, I said, so let's say we hadn't met. were you aware that there would be a new community? Did you ever think that there would be a place for people who left and could say, "Hey, I'm someone who was in MAGA, I supported for the right reasons, I decided to leave." And all of them have said, "No, we never
Mhm.
really thought there would be a community. We just told our stories and we thought that that was it." And now I'm proud of the fact that it's not, I don't take credit for this, but our team has developed a community where people are now actually leading. So we're still telling stories, but we are, I feel like our organization is at the beginning. No, let me rephrase. It's at the end of the beginning.
Mhm.
So it's that phase one. So we're at the end of the beginning of Leaving MAGA, ready to get to phase two, which is more storytelling, expanded reach,
Mhm.
more testimonials from those who left, and more conversations with friends and family. So I consider myself as lucky a human being as any when it comes into the topic of having left MAGA, because if not for so many of the key people around me and around this organization, we would not be in a position we're in right now.
Yeah. It sounds like, uh, the community that you built is like really helping to support the wider community as a whole. And like, I think you should give yourself a little bit more credit. If you didn't come up with the idea and like try to get the word out and like start, the organization, there wouldn't be a community in the first place.
Well,
So,
thank you for thank you for saying that.
yeah.
I am personally, in addition to my gratitude, and in addition to feeling quite lucky, I do feel like those who are going to hear this, they should know that I put in full-time hours
Hmm.
into this organization, even though I'm not paid from a full-time basis. We're going to go through fundraising, which I'm really dreading having to do this, right? And I small business success, so it's not that I ever had reservations in the past about asking for money. It's different in a nonprofit though, because everyone is inundated with requests for money.
Yeah.
We just went through this entire election cycle where we were bombarded dozens of times a day. But
Yes.
I know that we're going to need to go through that, and I'm confident. I'm confident in what it is that we're offering in our work, that I think we're going to have fundraising success.
Hmm.
And again, that's the credit to our team. But I am putting in full-time hours on almost no pay,
Hmm.
aside from some donating. We've had some sizable benefactors who have decided to donate, but we're going to start on that path, because we just need to do it. As much
Yeah.
as we wish it weren't the case, we need capital to operate and
Yeah.
expand.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think last time you mentioned that you guys are trying to set up like in-person like community in every single state. As of right now, is most of your community building online still?
Yes, it is online. Our team and those who have given testimonials, we are scattered across the country.
Hmm.
We're in every time zone right now,
Hmm.
between our editorial, our creative, those who manage our website, even the testimonials. Those individuals are all across the country.
Hmm.
What I envision, actually, for the in-person events eventually, is what those are going to be. Is you may recall in our first conversation, I'd mentioned a dis and misinformation literacy workshop
Yeah.
that we're putting together. And the reason that that issue is so important is because mis and disinformation not only contributed to my unapologetic support for Trump and MAGA, it's what kept me in.
Hmm.
And then once I started to figure out that my beliefs were actually incorrect, or maybe were accurate to some extent, but were lacking nuance or context, or were just too black and white, I started to figure out, well, relying solely on one ideological type of media is going to keep someone stuck in that silo.
Hmm.
It's not a good comparison, but I've always aspired to want to go to law school, actually.
Hmm.
After our conversations, you might say, don't do it. You know, no, Rich is a better place. And I'm not suggesting that I'm going to resign from Leaving Mag and go to law school, but I've always had an ambition to do it.
Hmm.
And I think about one of the traits that makes for a really good attorney is that you put yourself on you try to think like the opposing counsel.
You want to figure
And
out
I,
their strategy. Yeah,
exactly, exactly. You know,
exactly.
and I can imagine that's particularly important in, let's say, criminal law, or
Mhm.
maybe high profile class action lawsuits as an example. You try to put yourself in that position to think about what the opposing legal team, where they might come with us, right? Because everyone's got the same evidence, right? By law, you have to all be working with the same evidence that's been approved by a
Theoretically.
judge, right? Yeah. Okay. Right. Until you discover it's not the case, and then have to be quick on your feet, because that's why I know lawyers get a bad rap, but I do respect the preparation
hmm
that goes into casework, even though I've never been in that world. I do. I can appreciate just how hard it is to prepare and prep. With information, it's there are some overarching principles, because when I started to diversify my news and information sources, I now started to have to think about, well, those who are providing different information, they're doing it in such a way that they've done their preparation and they've done their fact checking. And it doesn't mean, Vicky, that even the most accurate media is 100% correct. We know that.
hmm
But when you're in the info silo, that's what that's one of the reasons that keeps people in the MAGA community,
hmm
because there is this question. It's asked exasperatedly by a lot of people who have never been in MAGA and have never supported Trump. Rich, I don't understand, after XYZ and ABC, why do people still stay?
hmm
And I know that this is probably an unsatisfactory answer as it pertains to the communal existence, but everybody has a particular line
hmm
of demarcation.
hmm
And I really do believe that for many in MAGA, there's going to come a point where they're going to cross a Rubicon because of one lie too many,
hmm
or because of one unnecessary death too many, or because of one avoidable illness too many.
Yeah.
And everyone, we have to look at people as individuals, even when they're in a communal existence.
Yeah.
Because for me, I had to go through January 6th, and I had to go through anti-vaccine sponsorship by Ron DeSantis, and then I had to go through Uvalde. So I went through all of this.
hmm
And for those who are just trying to ask, they're just so frustrated with, I don't understand why people stay. What you and I are talking about is, I think, really key, because I think when people think of MAGA less as a cult, less as a hate group, and more as like something that we all yearn for, which is community, it
hmm
starts to make a little more logical sense. Now, do I think that MAGA is a toxic community? Yes. It's also why it's important to separate the people from the community.
hmm
Because as I'd mentioned in our initial conversation, there's no ideology. The closest to ideology in MAGA is a belief of the evils of liberalism.
hmm
And that gets manifested in a lot of the rhetoric and a lot of the invective that is lobbed at Democratic figures and
hmm
anti-Trump Republicans and conservatives.
hmm Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely a great point, is the sense of community. I do think that like people who and it also comes down to like the double downing, I think, of so of the mindset of some people in
Yes,
MAGA or alt-right, like you have the entire world telling you that you're wrong and that you're a bad person for believing what you believe, and you're like, well, I have to prove them wrong then. I got to double, triple, quadruple down.
that's right.
Because if I admit I'm wrong, then my entire existence has been right. Like,
Well, I had to figure out something to that point.
hmm
And I think this is one of the, I don't know if it's an inherent flaw or it's just something I don't believe it is, because I think we can control it. Something about activism
Yeah.
that just drives me crazy is that I look at the way that certain activism is deployed,
hmm
and there can be broad concurrence on the goal,
hmm
but it's the methodology that I'm also really paying close attention to.
hmm
And in anti-MAGA activism, if I were to go around and ask everybody who's got friends and family in MAGA, hey, do you want your friends and family to leave MAGA?
Hmm.
Simple question, not a gotcha. Oh yeah, absolutely, I want them to leave. Okay, great. So we have this broad agreement on the goal.
Yeah.
But I'll ask them, well, but what's your standard operating procedure for this?
Yeah.
What are your tactics? Well, my tactics are tough love, and I got to tell them they're in a cult, and I need to. And I said, well, that's exactly what
Yeah.
makes it harder for them to leave.
Yeah.
And I'll joke with them sometimes and say, damn it, you're making my job harder. And I don't want to pick on any one group, but it's like, for example, environmental activists, right?
Hmm.
And I look, I want the earth protected. I
Hmm.
want clean water, clean air. I think
Hmm.
most Americans feel that way, even those who are right leaning. Well, if your activism is that, and we agree on the goal, great. But then it's let's throw, let's spray paint Stonehenge, or let's throw carrot soup at something. Well, guess what people are going to pay attention to? They're going
The
to pay attention to the methods.
hmm and not your
So they're
message.
so they're completely overlooking. So you've given them a reason to overlook. So every time I hear cult about MAGA, I really caution against that kind of language, Vicky, because all that does is it strengthens the already strong bond
Hmm.
that those people have to the community. And perhaps even worse,
Yeah.
let's say that the cult language is utilized in the context of someone who's maybe having doubts. Well, guess what? Guess what? One of the ways is to start erasing their doubts. Tell them they're in a cult,
Yep.
and it's why I really, it's why I see in the marketplace, and I'm not going to name names because they're not here to defend themselves.
Hmm.
Thinking like an attorney here, but there are people out in the political world, punditry world, who talk about how MAGA is a cult and they portray themselves as experts because maybe they do have PhDs, or maybe they've got a lot of experience in clinical psychology, and they're out there talking about MAGA as a cult. And I try to tell people, with all due respect to them, I'm not saying don't listen to them, but I would say really scrutinize what it is that they're saying, because number one, they don't have anyone as a actual client.
Hmm.
Like, no one is one of their patients, number one. So there's an ethical question. But if calling MAGA was a cult, if think about it this way, there have probably been billions of words penned and spoken
Hmm.
about how MAGA Americans are Nazis and evil and misogynists, etc. Well, Vicky, if that worked, nobody would be in MAGA.
Yeah.
Like, the conversation you and I would be having would not be about leaving MAGA. It would have been, oh my God, everybody left. This is amazing. Well, why did you leave, John? Well, I left because someone said I was a Hitler sympathizer. Or why did you leave, Mary? Well, they told me I was an Islamophobe, and I said, oh yeah, I'm an Islamophobe. I think I'll leave MAGA. I said, no one ever, and they never will.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why, as a community, part of what we do is that we want to not just say but show
Hmm.
that it's okay to say that we're wrong.
Hmm.
That we could have done something with what we thought were good intentions, but it turned out that what we were doing didn't really reflect who we are and our values. And this argument that no, 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 people who are in MAGA, it appealed to them because they are racist deep down, because they have hate deep down. I don't really buy that for most people. Now, again, like we said in our first conversation, are there some bad people? Yes,
Hmm.
and there always will be. But I
Hmm.
don't believe that to be the case of those in the community, and I do believe that there are many there right now whose doubts have commenced,
Hmm.
who are starting to question their beliefs.
Hmm.
Can I prove that? Not really. Can I offer a number of however many that may be? I can't, but here's what I know. I know that there are people who have left. I
Hmm.
know that there are people who have come to us and are starting to tell us they've got doubts. So I know that they're out there. And we want everyone in the United States to know who Leaving MAGA is. Every American. We
Hmm.
want them to know who we are. And we
Hmm.
want them to know that when we say that our invitation to our community is open and indefinite, we mean that.
Yeah. So, what do you think is the most important, like, part, like something, if someone is trying to build a community like you are, what do you think is something that is the most important people should like hold on to in order to form a community?
Let me just make sure I understand what you're asking.
Yeah.
If, and my apologies if I misconstrue.
Oh, no worries.
Are you referring to what some of the necessary steps are to build?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, okay. I think so. I'm very big on leadership,
Hmm.
and I believe that one of the traits of a successful leader that is perhaps most important than any other trait
Hmm.
is that the leader actually cares about other people.
Hmm.
So in a community, the leadership has to show that they actually do care about those who are within the community and the organization, but those who are outside of it.
So
And
empathy.
I empathy, because empathy and education are inextricably linked.
Hmm.
And it's why I know I drive a lot of people mad with a lot of my social media saying, look, extending the olive branch doesn't mean that you are agreeing with the beliefs of someone in MAGA. That is not what it means. But that phobia has developed because of polarization.
Hmm.
And if someone is showing, forget about saying, anybody can say, I care about other people. Anybody can say anything.
Yeah.
But people are smart and intuitive, and they see when someone says you have to care about people and they're doing it. People recognize that.
Yeah.
And I would like to think from our team that they do see that it's very clear that I do believe in that caring about other people is the bedrock of leaving MAGA.
Yeah.
If you look at our mission statement, we talk about empowerment, storytelling, we talk about reconciliation, we talk about leadership.
Hmm.
Sometimes caring about people can be uncomfortable
Hmm.
in the way that, but it can never be disrespectful. It can never dehumanize.
Hmm.
And I'm very attuned, Vicky, to dehumanization because I engaged in it every hour while in MAGA.
Hmm.
So I think first and foremost, there needs to be it needs to be shown that empathy for those in the community and outside of. Now, there's something else that I think also is really important with leadership. A leader will never ask somebody to do something that he or she is unwilling to do himself, herself.
Hmm.
And if we're going to talk about building a community, and I as the founder, okay, I to use a good, again, sports analogy here, um, you got to be the first to arrive and the last to leave.
Yeah.
You have to be.
Yeah.
And if someone doesn't want that, fair enough, but don't try to lead an organization then.
Yeah.
Don't do that because again, people are instinctual and they see it, they observe it with their own eyes, and our eyes often don't lie to us.
Yeah.
And so that's an important trait also. So I really come down to those two. I know that we can, read a book and say the top 5 reasons or the top 10, but I feel like if you're caring about other people and you're the first one to leave, first one to arrive, last one to leave, and the third one that I would add in there, and again, it's about what's observable.
Hmm.
The organization does need to show gradual growth.
Hmm.
Now, I don't think that means that you got to go from 0 to 60 in 4 seconds,
Hmm.
but people also want to feel like they are part of something that is building and growing.
Hmm.
As much as I don't want to make this about winning and losing, because I don't look at leaving MAGA that way,
Hmm.
but people do want to have a feeling that they're on the winning side.
There's movement. Yeah.
Right. And again, that's part of what has become attractive about MAGA. I will tell you,
Mhm.
after 2016, when we won and we were vindicated and we were validated and we took on the world and defeated the world, I remember not sleeping that night.
Hmm.
And I remember thinking, this is where I'm meant to be.
Hmm.
So this wasn't, see you in 4 years, guys.
Yeah.
This was, I'll talk to you in the morning so we could get our game plan in motion,
Yeah.
right? Without sleep. And that's how it was. So winning, people want to be on that side, right? I
Yeah.
know there's a famous speech by our revered general George Patton during World War II, right, when he said Americans love a winner.
Yeah.
And I do think that that's true because we are a people, as I mentioned initially, we're people who are rebellious people.
Hmm.
And while I do think there's too much of a zero sum mentality in politics,
Hmm.
We want to be on the side that's showing growth. So we've got empathy, which I'll call empathy in education.
Hmm.
We've got the first to arrive, last to leave, and then we've got the you're showing gradual growth
Hmm.
because people need to see that the marketplace actually wants what the product is that's being offered, and that's a little
Yeah.
bit of a sales and marketing perspective that I'll add in there. So I those are the three. Those are the three I honestly live and die by.
Yeah. No, these are really great. I definitely think that your point about the growth is like that's a really great point because you're absolutely right. Like MAGA is very organized in comparison to a lot of like the more liberal or leftist leaning groups. We're kind of just surround like infighting all the time. Whereas I do feel that MAGA is very and the right in general is very good at organizing people and getting people to show up locally and um, be active basically in the community. So no, that's a really great point actually. And like the kind of group mentality is so I think is so important in building a community because now you're part of the in-group, right?
Yeah, exactly, and you may recall on our first conversation about keeping information out of the MAGA community.
Hmm.
Even if I disagreed privately with something the president did, it was never publicly said,
Yeah,
and we didn't publicly say it because if we went out and publicly said it, it weakened the ties that bound the community.
yeah,
And I know how people are going to respond to that. Oh, Rich, you said a few minutes ago, don't say cult. Well, it sounds like a cult.
yeah,
Okay, I understand why someone would say it,
yeah,
and I'll try to meet in the middle on that point. That some aspects of it may be cult like, and it were for me.
yeah.
But there's no guiding ideology that MAGA relies on. And I know I've mentioned that point a few times, but I think it's important to reiterate that because there is not when you look at what is generally defined as a cult, their MAGA is not that.
Hmm.
Cults are not tens and tens and tens of millions of people.
Hmm.
And Donald Trump isn't some master propagandist. That's something else that I see a lot of among so-called experts is they speak about him as if he's, someone who actually thinks all of this through. No, his skill, his superpower is lying. And one of the reasons that MAGA can remain organized is because people are adhering publicly and or privately to the same lies.
Hmm.
So those same lies that exist in Washington state,
Hmm.
the same right-wing MAGA lies that exist there are the same that exist in Florida where I am.
Hmm.
The same ones that exist in Los Angeles are the same ones that exist in a rural town of 500 people.
Yeah.
The lies are all the same. And with democratic politics, there's that old famous saying, I'm not a member of any organized party, I'm a Democrat.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to lead majorities
Hmm.
because majorities have various groups. Some of those interests can overlap, and sometimes groups have particular interests that are unique to their group that are valid wants and valid concerns.
Hmm.
So it makes it very difficult. And I don't I don't think that the Democratic Party up until this election I don't think they had accepted that their old mythology of demographics or destiny
Hmm.
wasn't that they still believed it was true. That's how I should phrase this. Let me rephrase that. I think for some they still believed in the mythology of demographics or destiny.
Yeah.
And this election should retire that once and for all. And I also think and I hope, because I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, that the Democratic Party is going to understand that you cannot combat mis and disinformation solely online.
Yeah.
And that's why our in-person workshop ideas, which can be done online as well,
Yeah.
I'm willing to do it in any way we can about how to identify mis and disinformation is really crucial to leaving MAGA's work
Hmm.
because it's the reason that I essentially became MAGA and stayed MAGA.
Hmm.
So it directly pertains to my own life and my experiences.
Hmm. So, what do you normally have like? community members, are they able to like talk to each other? Do you have a like Facebook
Yes,
group or something or any?
yes, we do. We communicate. So right now we've been communicating up until recently. It's been on Twitter.
Uh-huh.
There's also some communication on other social media apps, Blue Sky, while it's starting to now pick up. Very happy to see that growth.
The new Twitter.
And again, as they're growing, they're starting to now start to experience some of those growing pains.
Yeah.
And now we're curious to see how they handle, because whatever one's opinion of Jack Dorsey, when he was in charge of Twitter, Twitter was a far superior public square than it
Yeah.
is right now.
Yeah.
And and everyone knows that,
Yes.
right? Everybody, Elon Musk knows that, because Elon Musk probably knows what he doesn't know, and he knows that what he's done with Twitter is he's
Burned it to the ground.
essentially annihilated. He's just annihilated so much of what Dorsey at the time and his team did well. Now I stay on Twitter. A lot of our community members are on Twitter, but we're expanding that community where we're going to have our community groups that are include the testimonials, or excuse me, those who gave testimonials about leaving, the friends and family. I am just completely humbled by how many people, when I put a social media post out of, hey, do you have a friend or relative who's in MAGA, or did you leave, or do you know, are you having doubts? And people write to me privately,
Hmm.
and they offer to do testimonials
Hmm.
unsolicited, right? And I guess technically there's a solicitation because I ask them to contact me.
Yeah.
But when they approach me, they say, I want to do this. And I think, I'm a complete stranger to these people.
Yeah.
But that trust has been built because of empathy and education. People see us doing the work,
Yeah.
and people see we're growing.
Yeah.
So those three traits, we're right back to them once again. We've right. So in a circular way,
Hmm.
we've gotten back to them. And so there is that community that will keep growing and growing and growing. And as we do, what those in the community know is that for anyone who wants to take on a larger role
Hmm.
as in a leadership position, it is open to them, because who better to lead? If you think about it, who better to lead the movement than those who left in the friends and family?
Yeah.
The friends and family are our allies.
Yeah.
And that's what and this again is completely accidental, Vicky. I did not plan for it this way. No matter where we go in the country, like
Hmm.
I mentioned earlier, whether it's in Washington State or Florida, or it's a rural area of 500 or Los Angeles, everywhere in the country has been affected by MAGA in some way.
Yeah.
Every square inch has been traumatized
Yeah.
by Donald Trump and his sycophants.
Yeah.
Now, that's not good news, but the opportunity before us is such that no matter where we are, people can leave having learned something if they're willing to, right? And the onus is on us. The onus is on us to teach them,
Hmm.
and not teach them because they lack intelligence or good character, but the educational part of it, that's our burden.
Yeah.
But our team is willing to assume that burden because of this staunch belief that we have in what it is that we are doing. And you said that no one's doing it out there. I thank you for recognizing that. I if someone comes along with a better idea to help people leave, I will cease and desist efforts, and I will immediately align with whomever that other group or person is.
Hmm.
Because my interest is not in Rich getting credit; it's in getting people to leave MAGA. That's what I want.
Hmm.
Right? That's the ultimate end goal.
Hmm.
Even with our allies, friends, and family, when they tell their stories, they all say, I'm going to share the video with my son or my mother or my father. They all agree to do it. And I tell them, whatever conflicts you may have had, I'll tell you this, they're not going to turn away from this video. The fact that someone would make a public appeal and say, I just want my kids back.
Yeah.
We had a video come out today of a lady whose sons first succumbed to QAnon, and then they fell prey to this tech bros
Hmm.
community.
The Elon. Yeah. The Elons.
Right. And now what does that community what do they have in common with leaving MAGA? They've got individuals leading the community.
Hmm.
So they have a common place with leaving MAGA and actually with MAGA itself, because MAGA, you've got Donald Trump leading the community. Leaving MAGA, you've got our team. Yes, I, as the founder, I'm the public face. And then you've got the tech bros who are Elon Musk and Joe Rogan and
Hmm.
those guys. So what do you now? Who's the leader of the Democratic Party?
Great
Who's
question.
who's leading? Let me ask you, who's leading that community?
That,
Here's part of the problem. There are so many who could.
yes.
They're not, the Democratic Party is not want for talent.
Yeah.
But I've got a saying that I taught my kids, and I think this is a pretty good business one too. If I have to ask who's in charge, nobody is.
Yeah.
No one has to, and again, I take no credit. No one has to ask that at Leaving MAGA.
Hmm.
No one has to ask that in MAGA. No one has to ask that in the tech bros.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter one's opinion of these individuals. What matters is who's in charge. Who's in charge of the Democratic Party? They've got to get to a position where the jockeying for that leadership role, because right now the closest they have is probably former President Obama,
I
who
think you're
hasn't
right.
been president in nearly a decade.
Yeah. I think it's
And
probably
I'm
about
not criticizing former President Obama. I have a great deal of admiration for that man.
hmm.
But this is what happens after a loss. You lick your wounds and you say, okay, see, on issues, the majority of the people are on the side of the Democratic Party on issues.
Yeah.
The question is how to translate it in the zero-sum world of electoral politics.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the Democratic Party does, I know that it may not seem that way right now with what happened, but they actually do have very good political instincts.
Yeah.
So that's about as much punditry as I'm going to offer for our conversation here.
Yeah. No, that's great point. I wish I could talk to you about like so many other things. Because
Well,
yeah.
you're welcome to any time you want to bounce stuff off me and ask questions, even if it's not particularly related to your paper. I'm here to help. That's, when I say empathy and education, it's what we do.
Yeah.
So you're welcome anytime. It's never a bother, really.
That's awesome. Because like
And
you
I like work,
are,
and I like working with young. Like I I I feel reinvigorated.
hmm.
You're being having the youthful energy and caring so much deeply about these issues, right? And it's not, and I know young people get such a bad rap. I don't think that it's that young people don't care. I think that the ways that they are messaged and the attempts to appeal to them aren't done in such a way that their demographic can really grasp onto.
Yeah.
And again, it's not an intelligence problem, it's a sales and marketing problem.
Hmm.
And this is where the right wing tends to not have a problem, because all of the figures are essentially selling the same product.
Hmm.
Now, granted, I think the marketplace isn't that big for it, but everyone's selling this. So it doesn't matter. You throw out a name of the right wing. You give me any two or three names, and
Um,
I will tell you that they're selling the same product. Okay, you don't have to exactly do it at this moment, but I'm saying you give me two or three names you think about, and I promise you that they're selling the identical or very close to product.
yeah.
Okay, that's what they're selling. What's Joe Rogan? What's Joe Rogan selling? What's Tucker Carlson selling? What's Alex Jones selling? They're all selling the same product, the evils of liberalism.
Hmm.
But because it's sales and marketing, we package it a certain way. Maybe we use certain language. Maybe we have other surrogates who do it a certain way. Kevin McCarthy and Mike Johnson in Congress and Mitch McConnell and Rick Scott are not calling up Sean Hannity and saying, "Hey, Sean, I've got a great bullet point for you
Yeah.
for your show." It's the other way around.
Yeah.
Those politicians watch what's being said in the right wing media info ecosystem and then just adopt those points
Yeah.
for their own fundraising and their own uh, rhetoric and everything else that they do in their campaigning day to day.
Yeah.
So that's how this. I realized when I left MAGA that actually Donald Trump did not have a singular original idea,
Hmm.
not one.
Yeah.
He just had a bunch of people who trafficked in the right wing media world and said, "Well, this is what they're talking about, and this is what they're talking about, and this is what they're talking about." And he said, "Okay, we're going to adopt it as our own then."
Hmm.
That's exactly what Elon Musk doesn't have a singular original idea.
Hmm.
People should have more babies. You could go back to the earliest days of America and find that.
Yeah.
So there's no innovation on the part of Elon Musk's rhetoric.
Yeah.
I don't want to pick on him. I'm just saying it because he's one of the, he wants to put himself in that position. Though that's, as Hyman Roth told Michael Corleone in The Godfather Part Two, it's the business we've chosen. It's the business I chose. So I'm willing to take the slings and arrows on behalf of our team.
Yeah. No, that's great. Um, okay, so because we just want to make sure I get through everything. Um,
Has this
so
been helpful today? Has this been helpful?
yes, very much so.
Okay.
I'm very
Okay.
glad
Good.
that we're doing the second session because I think the community part building has been quite the biggest challenge, I think, in the past of getting people to leave because me personally, I started like learning a lot more about right-wing ideology and how like it forms and like kind of like the more academic perspective of it through YouTube actually. I watch a lot of YouTubers kind of break down the method and the ways
Hmm.
that, right-wingers form their community. And those YouTubers for a very long time have been kind of at the forefront of de-radicalization. But because it's a YouTube video, it's very difficult for people to actually form a community around like the comment section, right? So hearing that, you're facilitating person-to-person communication and like really getting that human connection, like that I think is such an important part of building and maintaining a community. So like this is like learning how to organize is what has been missing, I think, for a while in for to get people to leave or help people leave.
And if people want to get on, for example, Blue Sky,
Mhm.
they have on there called starter packs, and what those starter packs are accounts who are part of the Leaving MAGA community,
Yeah.
and it's a variety of people. It's friends and benefactors. It's those who
Yeah.
have given testimonials, friends, or excuse me, yeah, friends and family. It's also others whose work has helped informed a lot of our approach, and that's growing.
Hmm.
That's growing virtually every day as we
Yeah.
do that. And I'm just I do have a great source of pride that we've been able to, all of us as a team, we've held true to our values and our principles. Doesn't mean we're not flexible.
Hmm.
Maybe someone who's looking at leadership might want to throw flexibility in. I'm
Hmm.
okay with that. There's other important traits beyond just the three I offered earlier, but that is growing on a daily basis. And so the people who are doing the work, they can see that their efforts are actually bearing fruit.
Yeah.
And it's important to really be able to see that.
So do you see like people who get involved who were formerly MAGA, do you see them like go on to further like the Leaving MAGA message and like help others get out as well?
Yes, and I also and I can see even that and it's not that their approach was incorrect before
Hmm.
joining us in leaving MAGA, but a lot of the messaging started to evolve a little bit
Hmm.
about the importance of leaving and the importance of that personal story and
Yeah.
experience. And they've taken on that role as a way of approaching those in MAGA, not in a way that condescends, not in a way that impugns their integrity, but in such a way of, we can relate to why you're there.
Hmm.
It's probably many of the same reasons we decided to become a MAGA American, and here are the reasons why we left.
Hmm.
I just posted something today on social media about how to navigate holiday conversations
Hmm.
with our MAGA friends and family.
Yeah.
And I know that people are going to read it. So many, right? I don't want to prejudge this. I'm not judging anyone, but I know they're going to read it and think, well, Rich, I think I've tried that already, and I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'll say, okay, maybe you did, but here's something that we can show you has actually had real world experience in applicability.
Hmm.
And I can see the comments coming in saying, okay, thank you. I've not tried all of this, or maybe I tried it in such a way that I created a little hostility. I'm going to try again. One lady today wrote us a message saying, I watched your last video with the lady whose sons fell to QAnon and the tech bros. You've changed my mind. I need to do better.
Yeah.
There's a person who wrote this, and I want to say something, Vicky, about that point. And again, I take no credit. The apogee of influence is
Hmm.
changing people's cognition and behavior.
Hmm.
Okay, it is not getting them to send money.
Yeah.
The apex of influence is someone says, I'm going to behave differently, I'm going to think differently.
Yeah.
When you've reached that point, and again, why is that important? I say this because the people who are devoting their time, treasure, and talents to leaving MAGA need to see that people are complete strangers in the marketplace are actually telling us, I've changed my mind.
Yeah.
So this idea, which I will call a mythology, that people aren't persuadable,
Hmm.
that people can't change their minds, it's not true.
Hmm.
But because it doesn't happen often, is again why I can understand why someone might say, Rich, this it's a quixotic endeavor to try to get someone to change their mind.
Hmm.
I recognize that our beliefs are tend to be cemented, but it doesn't mean they can't change.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean, and we're showing we've got living proof that it has happened, Vicky. Perhaps you could start with me on this. Well, I changed my mind.
Yeah.
Okay, I changed my mind. We've got others who changed their minds, and now we've got those who are tracking what we're doing and following us because they believe in the movement, saying, "Okay, you changed my mind also."
Yeah.
Because we need to make it so where we champion and celebrate that we're evolving. Changing our mind is a sign of personal evolution and maturation.
It's growth. Yeah.
It's growth, right? And we're back to the theme. There's a leitmotif throughout today, growth.
Hmm.
And but if it because changing of one's mind has been so stigmatized as a sign of weakness,
Yeah.
it makes people, even if they want to change their minds, it gives them incentive to say, well, if I change my mind, I'm probably going to be ridiculed for it, and I don't want that to happen. No one wants to be ridiculed.
Yeah.
I'll give you this point also about being on the inside of MAGA, and this is a point that I I'm going to be mentioning a little bit more than I have in the past.
Hmm.
Is that in MAGA you never apologize
Hmm.
ever, and I
Hmm.
mean ever. It doesn't mean if you're even if you are 100% in the wrong,
Hmm.
you never apologize because when you apologize, you empower your enemies. That's what
Hmm.
we believed,
Hmm.
and I have no reason to believe that that belief is still not pervasive across the community right now.
So do you now think apologizing is a really important part of like the reconciliation process?
I would defy anyone
Hmm.
respectfully to show me how progress in our country's history could have been made without people changing their mind in reconciliation.
Hmm.
How did we abolish? And I'm not comparing myself, okay, to any of the movements of the past,
Yeah.
abolitionists, the Union Army, okay, President Abraham Lincoln, the women's suffragists, civil and voting rights activists, and champions. They could not have made the progress they did
Hmm.
without people changing their minds, without someone saying, I used to support slavery, I don't any longer.
Hmm.
I used to think women should not be able to vote. Now I believe that they should be enfranchised. I used to think that segregation was constitutional. I don't believe that anymore.
Hmm.
That's how we've made gains in our country's history. And I do see leaving MAGA as an important organization with a really relevant and I hope relatable message
Hmm.
going forward post election.
Hmm.
I want us to be positioned as one of the leaders in finding a way to have a reconciliation and a forgiveness.
Yeah.
But I do want to also, if I may, reiterate this point.
Hmm.
There cannot be reconciliation without accountability.
Hmm.
And what that meant for me is that I had to find a way to forgive myself,
Hmm.
and I needed to say, I'm sorry. I was wrong.
Yeah.
I was wrong about pretty much everything.
Yeah.
I was wrong about the way I thought about those closest to me.
Hmm.
I don't believe the American people will frown upon that. I believe they'll embrace it.
Yeah, I definitely think so too. I think accountability is a huge part because it really shows it shows the growth, right? And it
There
shows
we are
the
again. There
learning.
we are.
Yeah.
There we are. Growth and learning, education and empathy. I'm liking this,
Yeah.
Vicky. I'm liking what and again, I'm not making any comparison to, for example, the South African reconciliation or the peace accords after Vietnam or
Yeah.
even post-bellum America after the Civil War. Not saying we are like those groups and individuals. However, there are some similar principles because we are going to need to figure out a way to live harmoniously again with those who are in the MAGA community.
Yeah.
Democracy, and in particular, have it thrive if tens and tens and tens of millions of Americans are pitted against each other and estranged from and alienated from those closest to them. I'm not talking about being alienated from strangers. I'm talking about alienation and estrangement from those closest to them, friends and family.
Like so that actually brings me to my next question, like really well. Would you say that like what is the reconciliation process that you see when people reconcile with people in like their personal lives, especially after leaving MAGA? Like, do you think that friends and family are very willing to take people back? And where do you think forgiveness like kind of plays a role in all of that?
Sure, and I don't think forget. Thank you, and a lot of what I'll say, yes, admittedly, will come from my personal experience.
Sure, yeah.
I don't think that forgiveness should be free.
Hmm.
Um, and and the reason I don't say that is because yes, a lot of my interviews and a lot of my media appearances, I talk about how these MAGA and right wing mythologies, once the claws get stuck, they
Hmm.
tend to just burrow in.
Hmm.
But having said that, we still also need to remind ourselves that all of us have agency.
Yeah.
I can say all day long, and I see this online. There are some people out there who left MAGA and they say, I was duped because I was in a cult.
Yeah.
I find that to be a lazy take
Yeah.
because I think that to ask for forgiveness, someone has to actually say this is where the I is really important because the I part of this story is that we have agency and that no one is coerced or coaxed into their support. No one forced me into saying what I said.
Hmm.
No one demanded of me that I needed to think the way I thought.
Hmm.
But I know that the American people, because we are a good people are always will show grace if genuine penitence is sought by those who are in the MAGA community who may have which if you're in the community, and for those listening who are going to hear this who are in the MAGA community, I am saying this as least judgmental as I can, but being in the community means aiding and abetting
Hmm.
truly, truly reprehensible statements and actions.
Hmm.
And that was something that I really had to come to terms with.
Yeah.
That I had to, as part of the self forgiveness, I had to sit back and think so much of what I said even now, Vicky, looking back on it, I still feel a degree of shock a little
Hmm.
saying it. So it can't be free, but I think that reconciliation it, it's complex because we're a complex species, but I think the process of it is relatively simple.
Yeah.
It's someone coming to a place of saying, I'm sorry and I was wrong,
Hmm.
and I want to offer to you an apology. Maybe as part of that, it could be, I understand if you may not accept that apology, but I want to offer it.
Yeah.
And those who do that, Vicky, they are going to find overwhelmingly that those to whom they apologize are going to welcome them back.
Yeah.
It's probably going to take time
Yeah.
for some of the reconciliation and restoration to occur. Again, there's a different kind of growth,
Yeah.
the gradual mending of those ties.
Hmm.
But you know what? I'll take a gradual mending than none at all.
That's great. Yeah. That no, that's really powerful. Okay. We are running up against time here, but I have one more question.
Sure.
Um, I wanted to get your thoughts on like the self-forgiveness part,
Mm-hmm.
right? It sounds like a lot of your journey really comes from like you started learning more and realizing like your past actions and your past thoughts and how they have caused harm. Where, so when you say self-forgiveness and forgiving yourself, what was that process like? As in, how did you come to realize um what you were like your beliefs were incorrect or yeah, your beliefs were incorrect? And how did you come across like reconciling that with yourself, I suppose?
I had to take stock, which was so uncomfortable to do this,
Hmm.
but I deemed it necessary for me to take stock of everything that I had published, everything I'd said privately, which oftentimes was the same
Hmm.
language that I used to describe, for example, Democrats. I refer to them in my works as malignant.
Yeah.
Okay, that kind of language is the nadir of dehumanization.
Yeah.
Okay, the overlooking loss of life
Yeah.
because I was concerned about the political ramifications, such as Charlottesville,
Yeah.
such as Trump managing COVID, such as January 6th,
Hmm.
such as Uvalde.
Hmm.
Uvalde was a time though that I stopped overlooking. I came to stop overlooking the loss of life.
Hmm.
For me, what made it so deeply personal for me was that I had deemed it acceptable
Hmm.
that people died and were traumatized and suffered needlessly.
Hmm.
And I also realized that I had made it acceptable that avoidable that excuse me that politically motivated violence was deemed justified by Trump and the Republican Party.
Hmm.
And those are really the two reasons I left. You know, when I think of them as lines of demarcation, the acceptance of avoidable deaths and suffering and the defense and justification of politically motivated violence, a, a coup that was partly orchestrated
Hmm.
by the president at the time. Those were two lines of demarcation I couldn't cross any longer. And so when I thought about self forgiveness, what makes it so excruciatingly tumultuous is that you have to look at what you said and thought and did truly for what they were.
Hmm.
You can't sugarcoat this when you're talking about forgiving yourself. You have to say what I said and what I thought and what I did should never ever have been said or done.
Hmm.
And when I came to a point where I finally said this was so wrong, there's no argument that could be made in the remotest that it was correct. That's eventually what brought me to self forgiveness.
Hmm. It sounds like
And as
you really unpack like the why, right? Like the why you believed or fell in and
you
everything.
you have to exhume all of the emotions
Hmm.
and the trauma and the allowance, right? Allowing myself to say and think this and do this because again we have agency. But once you exhume all of it and you dig it up, now you're seeing all of it in front of you. And you can't say, well, maybe that was justified or maybe that was defensible. No, you have to say this doesn't reflect who I am,
Hmm.
but I allowed it to reflect who I was for many years.
Hmm.
And as I went out and wrote my mea culpa, told my story, retold it over and over and over, the vast majority of responses, Vicky, that I've received are from people who said, and again, I'm not saying this in any kind of supercilious way, but from people who have said to me, Rich, it takes a lot of guts to leave.
Yeah.
And I'm a little embarrassed by that, not because I don't appreciate it, but because I think, damn it, I should have never gotten to that point.
Hmm.
But I do think about two biblical quotes,
Hmm.
which again will be appropriate for perhaps some Jesuits who may be listening, and not just Jesuits, of course. It could be people of any belief, and I think actually this is applicable. One of the reasons I think the Bible, why I extol it the way I do, is because it's anyone can read it. An atheist can gain knowledge
Oh yeah.
from
Speak for
this
myself. I
right.
have gained
Okay.
quite some knowledge.
Yeah. Okay. From this good, sagacious book, there's two
Yes.
quotes that come to mind. One is from the book of Isaiah, which is to bring good news to the afflicted.
Hmm.
And then there's another one that has informed our work immensely, which is the book of Romans, be patient in affliction.
Hmm.
And I think though Leaving MAGA is not an overtly religious organization, we welcome all beliefs. Someone who could be a devout, we have a lady who gave a testimonial who is devout in her faith,
Yeah.
but she knew that her devotion had been perverted
Yeah.
in MAGA. And then we have those who are not believers. So or I should say, not so much they're not believers, but religion isn't particularly prevalent in their lives.
Yeah.
To be clear, I should clarify that point. And then for me, I always joke that I'm an excommunicated Catholic. That's my wife doesn't like that joke. I always say that if I lived in the 1400s, I'd be in the excommunication file, down in the tunnels of the Vatican somewhere. But I think there is certainly for those who are inclined to belief in faith, I think they will hear some aspects of faith in our work.
Hmm.
And I think for those who aren't inclined to faith, that they'll still be able, I hope, to be able to relate to redemption. Like we
Yeah.
can we can we can redeem ourselves in ways that aren't necessarily of faith and of religion.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this in the context of an actual savior, if someone is a believer in salvation in the hereafter, but here in the here and now,
Hmm.
nobody can save another person, Vicky.
Yeah.
Someone has to want to be able to save themselves.
Hmm.
I can't make anyone leave MAGA.
Yeah.
But if someone comes to us with those doubts, we can show them that there's an exit ramp and that they actually have support from people who have been through it. And that's so important.
Yeah. The
The
empowerment.
beat the people who exactly the people who have been through it are the ones who have decided to lead and say that if our stories and our experiences can help people leave, we are here to help in the long run.
Yeah.
And I'm just so honored that people so courageously have decided to take those leadership roles and tell their stories, because it does really require a lot of intrepidity to go and be that vulnerable publicly.
Yeah. For sure. That's really powerful. And like I think that you're doing amazing work. I really hope that your
Don't
organization
embarrass me. Don't embarrass me. Thank
No,
you, but
I
please.
honestly like this is really important and crucial work. And something I think that like empathy is a lot of things that people forget, unfortunately. And you're absolutely like I think at the fundamental core, all humans, all we want is to be seen and heard by other people. And
Yes.
we are able to see and hear other people. That's how we like build connection and build community.
And that point right there is why a lot of people decided to join the MAGA community, because they
Yeah.
felt seen and they finally felt recognized.
Yeah.
It's very
Yes.
true what you said.
Yeah. Okay, so we are out of like just
Do
out
you
of
want to
time.
do you want to stop the recording?
Sure, yeah. And I also
Yeah, yeah.
wanted to ask if you